we're here today with Chris Aldous, one of our lecturers in Winchester University. Say hi, Chris.
Hi.
And I am with Ali today, who's doing her first interview.
Hi.
There you go. And I'm going to leave it to her. So, yeah, just keep listening.
Right, so to start off, where and what did you study at university?
I studied ancient and medieval history for my first year.
Oh.
And then I switched to modern history, and it was at Sheffield University.
That surprises me greatly. I didn't expect that.
And what attracted you to modern history then?
I just, lots of my friends were doing modern history, and although I enjoyed ancient and medieval, particularly ancient, I just decided towards the end of the first year that I was more a modern historian than a early historian.
That makes sense. It's fine. So, what were the aspects of modern history that appealed you more than the earlier period?
Well, there was an expert at Sheffield who did East Asian history. That's how I got into it. And I did courses with him in the second and third years. Like the depth study I do here is basically modelled on his at Sheffield.
That's quite cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was an external examiner here at one point, and he said, I recognise the modules. I recognise. I said, I'm not surprised, because it was modelled on yours. Yeah, it's Gordon Daniels at Sheffield. He's retired now.
Oh, yeah. Sounds really interesting.
And I did a really good course on 16th century Europe with Mark Greengrass that I really enjoyed. And what else? Political theory. I did some political theory as well. Yes. Can't remember what else I did. It's so long ago. It's 1985 to 1988, so it's quite a long time ago.
Some time ago.
Yeah.
I suppose your research now is taking most of that memory. So.
Yeah, and I think we did less modules than you do. That's probably a controversial thing to say, but perhaps because they were year-long. They were year-long courses rather than modules, so it was a different kind of setup. So perhaps.
So, if you could have taken a different career path, where else would you have ended up?
That is
today,
an interesting question.
Do you think? Did you have any other plans or any things you thought perhaps you would be interested
I did think about going into law.
Oh, really? Oh.
Mainly because my parents told me to. Perhaps. And I did think about it seriously, but because it's that your parents think it's a good idea, you kind of resist it. And the thing is, if you carry on studying because you really enjoy it, you suddenly find yourself, well, not suddenly, but you find yourself doing a PhD, and then you find yourself becoming a lecturer. It's not really, you just carry on studying as long as you can, and then before you know it, you're lecturing in a university. So law? Yes.
I'm kind of glad it wasn't law.
Well, law would be considerably better paid, of course. So.
But would it medicine, actually?
Medicine. Yeah. I was never good enough at science. My father was a doctor. So
you do have like a doctor profile. I can see you with the white.
I used to. I suppose I was very interested in what my father did as a GP, and I would have gone into medicine if I'd had the kind of science background. But I did English and history, and it's not a good training. He went into medicine. He did classics, and then he switched to medicine.
Oh.
He did a kind of conversion course for 2 years. You can't do that anymore. You have to have top A-level grades in physics, chemistry, and biology. I think, or at least chemistry and biology.
We all miss the science genes, don't we, when we end up in history?
Yes. But I'm really interested in history of science, but I don't really understand science.
It's a different approach, though, isn't it?
It's a lot more theoretical. So what was your undergraduate experience like, and did it live up to your expectations at all?
Sheffield was really good, yeah. I wouldn't have gone... I don't think I would have preferred anywhere else, even though I can't really say that. I think Sheffield was really good. I never really lived up north because I grew up in Oxfordshire, and Sheffield was just a brilliant student city. And it was the days when Blunkett was in charge of the city council, and all the buses were 5 and 10 pence because they were subsidised. It was the Socialist Republic of South Yorkshire. The transport was subsidised, and it was just had a really kind of interesting civic feel to it, the city. Yeah, it was a great place to be a student. So
That's good.
yeah, it was enjoyable.
Yeah, I've heard it's still quite a very good university in that sense. Everyone always seems really happy with their student life.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most popular universities. Yeah.
Did you learn any Eastern languages to help you while you were at university?
No, when I left university, I didn't do an MA. I went straight on to a PhD, which you can't do now. And as part of the application for the PhD, there was like a language training component. So I got an award from the Economic and Social Research Council, and there was 9 months of Japanese language training as part of it.
Oh.
So they paid for me to go to the School of Oriental and African Studies for 9 months and learn Japanese, or start learning Japanese.
Yeah, I've heard it's one of those things you need years and years to actually understand it.
It was seriously painful because you're studying with people who are really good linguists, and they expect you to learn the Japanese syllabaries in a fortnight, and you're straight in there. Really.
So would you recommend learning languages to students that are trying to learn Eastern history then? Do you think
I
it
think
helps?
if you, yes, it definitely helps, but obviously it's a huge commitment. So if you really want to study, say, Japanese or Chinese history for a career, I would recommend probably you do a dual degree. You know, you can do Chinese and history or Japanese and history, not here, but in other institutions. Because if you then try and learn it after your degree, it's a lot harder. But then again, if I'd done that, then I would have diluted the history component of my degree, which I would have regretted.
It's hard to keep a balance, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
It's one of those things. So what do you reckon has been the great obstacle in your career? If any.
Great obstacle. Probably this language, learning Japanese has been a great obstacle, yes, because I lived there for 9 months and I got to a level where I was getting quite comfortable, and then I left. I had to go to the US for 3 months and then came home. And I wish I could have stayed in Japan for maybe 2 years, and then I could have really broken through with the language. I can use the language, but not as nearly as fluently as I would like. For example, interviewing people is quite challenging. I run out of vocabulary quite quickly.
You always seem to translate videos fine, so that's the whole worry.
There was a lot of bluffing going on there, actually.
Not we know any different.
It can be one of those things, I think. It's like when you have to deal with another language.
Yeah.
It's because it's different understanding it yourself and then communicating it to someone else. It's like a dual process there. And once you have a general grasp of the language, you can get hints of a source that perhaps you are not fully able to transmit to someone else. So yeah, I totally relate to that.
But I guess an even bigger obstacle is reading it.
Yeah.
Reading it is...
Especially with these.
I always start off really keen with my dictionary, and I plough my way through, and then I start to lose momentum. And it can be, if you get stuck, it can be quite, So you have to kind of, when you're reading a foreign language that you're not that confident with, you have to just scan the book, find the passages you need, and then sit down and work through them. Otherwise, you'd be doing it for a lifetime.
Languages in history. So what do you enjoy most about your job as a university lecturer? Because I know there are different aspects to being a university lecturer. It's not only about doing the class and talking, but there's like admin and exciting things like that.
I don't enjoy the admin.
Yeah. No. Oh, big surprise.
I enjoy the teaching most, I think, on balance. But I also like doing research. But I wouldn't want to just teach or just do research. I like doing the two in balance, and you can just about do that here, because they do provide time leave every few years. But yeah, I enjoy the teaching most, because especially when you get into the third year and you're doing subjects that are your specialist subjects, then it gets really quite exciting. I'll use that word, yes, exciting, even after 20 years of it,
that is good, and you're still interested. And is it very different, like teaching like first year modules and third year modules? Do you prefer more the third years than the first year? I prefer
the third year modules, because the groups tend to be smaller and the seminars I had a third year seminar on Tuesday where everybody was really participating and contributing. So by the third year, students have reached a stage where they can really get into it, especially in a special subject. So I prefer that, although you can have some fun with the first years, like your first year group last year. Those seminars were quite fun. I mean, they weren't always well attended, but they were quite good, the debates. Yeah.
It's desperately hard to get first years to read seminar documents for
Yeah.
Ridiculous. Right, that leads quite swiftly on. What are you currently researching, if you're researching anything?
I'm researching the American promotion of Japanese whaling after the Second World War at the moment. So I'm doing a kind of environmental history now. So I've written this book with this Japanese professor on public health, and while I was doing that I was researching nutrition. And one of the things the Americans kept saying was the Japanese don't have enough animal protein, and therefore they encouraged the Japanese to start whaling again in the South Atlantic, in Antarctica, because whale would be a good source of animal protein.
Definitely.
And this caused real consternation among the Australians and New Zealanders and others who were whaling nations. Britain was also a whaling nation in 45, 46. So that's what I'm studying at the moment. So I'm quite interested. I'm getting more and more interested in environmental history, the history of wildlife, the history of other species apart from us. So I'm kind of departing a bit at the moment, but it's early days. I haven't really written much for a year or so. I need to get on this summer and get going, because it's often easier to collect. You'll probably find this you know this probably from your third year. It's often easier to sort of research and collect information than to actually sit down and write it up.
Yeah, I'm gonna get along with this.
Well, it's the same with essays, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the same with everything. The actual beginning to write something, even when you've written quite a lot, is hard.
Yeah, especially when you realise, I could go on and follow this other, idea.
You can easily get distracted.
And then you keep on doing that with every single thing. It's like, okay, need to stop.
Because you kind of displace what you've got to do by doing other things.
Yeah.
You know what you've got to do, but you just keep avoiding it. It's human nature, I think. Yeah.
Right, what brought you here to Winchester then?
My first job was a part-time lecturer here. When I came back from Japan in 1991, there was a part-time job here. And someone had just set up a Japanese studies modular program, Japanese studies and Japanese language. They were just setting it up. So it was the very beginning of it. And I was studying for my PhD at the LSE in London, and I heard about the job, and I got this job teaching one module on modern Japan. Then so that was just one term, or we were terms then, one term. And then I went back to doing my research, and then I started looking for jobs, and I got a job at the University of Derby for 1 year, and then a full-time job came up here. So I went for that, and I've been here ever since. So that was 1993.
Wow, that's been...
Did you ever get bored
nearly
of us?
20 years. I won't answer that. I don't get bored of any particular students, but only ever here 3 years.
Just push us up.
Well, some are here 4 or 5 years.
Some of us cling on.
No, that's...
Sometimes I think it might be a good idea to go somewhere else, but then it's very convenient working here. I walk to work. I like the department. I like the institution. So, in a way, it might be jumping out the frying pan into the fire to go somewhere else. I don't know, but there's we're a small department, so we do a lot of teaching, relatively speaking, I think, although you never really know, do you, how much. But sometimes I think we're doing a lot of different types of module, and it would be good to spend more time on preparing some of the modules, because sometimes you're a bit thinly spread.
Okay, well, this is a long one. Many Western students research undergraduate history studies, having never touched upon Eastern history in schools and colleges. Do you think it's actually important to address this issue, or is it better to come to university with a fresh outlook? This is the trap question.
Yeah. Because in schools we're always focused on the Holocaust.
Yeah, that sort of thing.
Medieval history, but never Eastern.
Well, I think there should be more East Asian history in schools, but if there isn't at the moment, except probably through the lens of the British Empire or something. I'm not quite sure I mean, there's a fair variety, isn't there, now at A level, but it still seems to be sort of Hitler or the Tudors, as far as I can see.
It's very focused on that, which surprises me though, because one would have expected, considering how the world is working, Chinese and China, that sort of environment would be something big, even Japan, considering World War II, and it's not.
But what I like about it is that people don't come thinking they already know about it.
Yeah.
So if you're teaching the Nazis, people say, well, I've already done it at A level, so I'm just going to sort of strengthen my knowledge base here. Whereas I don't get that with my Japanese or Chinese history. It's a fresh start for students. So in that way, they don't come with too many. Everyone comes with certain preconceptions, but not too many.
Yeah, we all walk in with deer in the headlights. Don't know what to expect.
I don't mind that. I quite like that in some ways. So,
I suppose.
Yeah.
It allows you to have a bigger impact on what your students are actually.
Yeah, maybe.
Rather than just tuning out and saying, I already know this.
Yes, that is an advantage that sometimes is an advantage of people who are starting almost from scratch, except for the kind of stereotypes they read about.
Good. What advice would you give to a student interested in studying history, particularly Eastern history?
What advice would I give? Work hard.
That's fairly reasonable advice.
Work hard, because history is a challenging subject, and you're not going to get much out of it unless you put a hell of a lot into it. So be prepared to read a lot. Don't do history unless you really are into it. You really enjoy it, because if you really enjoy it, it's going to be endlessly fascinating. But if it's something, if you find that reading is a chore and you don't really want to analyse historical problems, it's slightly obvious, don't do history. Yes. So I suppose my advice would be, just bear in mind that it is a bit like climbing a mountain. You've got to work very hard, but when you get to the top, it's worth it. You get the views.
That's a good advice.
A sense of achievement. Agony and ecstasy stuff.
It's all good in the end.
Definitely agree with that.
Right, that's another one. A lot of sources are written in Japanese, and primary sources are an absolute nightmare to find on Eastern history. Do you think it's important to publish works in English as opposed to Chinese, Japanese?
You mean, is it important for people to translate these documents? Yeah, this is a real constraint for me, because people come to me and they say, I'd really like to do a dissertation on Meiji Emperor or the Tiananmen Square massacre, and I always say, well, it's a brilliant topic, but primary sources are scarce, so you have to do it from the British perspective, or you have to do something else. Like, I often steer people to the period after the Second World War, the occupation, because I know a lot about that period, and because of course there's lots of sources in English, because it's the Americans wrote down a lot, and the Japanese had to translate quite a lot into English at the time. So that's a great opportunity to research Japan with access to English materials as well. But there are documents relating to the Meiji period and even the Tiananmen Square massacre from the Chinese perspective, because Western academics, often Americans, because they have more, they're not so constrained by this research assessment that we have in this country, so they have more time to do things like translate documents and think about how what they're doing is useful to students, undergraduate students. But I think it's really important that more is translated and made accessible to undergraduates, because in this country probably there are less than a dozen historians of modern Japan.
Really?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Wow.
I mean, I didn't realise that till my PhD supervisor said it to me, and then I sort of sat down and thought about it. It's true. There are other people working in international relations or political science, but in terms of modern historians or historians of Japan, less than a dozen. So
That
it's
is
quite
striking.
a sort of niche, really.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because it's difficult, and because there isn't that much in translation, and because there aren't that many textbooks compared to European history.
I suppose with sources that are written in Japanese as well, it gives you more of a push to ensure that you know that you want to do this, that you're going to commit to learning a language, so that you really have to push yourself.
Yes, you do. You're absolutely right. If you're going to do it properly, you've got to commit to the idea of buying a kanji dictionary, spending a lot of time studying pages, looking up kanji, and just battling away with the language. Yep.
Right, yeah, it runs a bit of a fantastical one here. Do you think truth will emerge with regards to events in communist China, or do you think it will forever be buried underneath communist oppression?
That's a really interesting question.
Little one for me
I
to
think
dig
the
in.
truth will out, won't it, eventually? I think already the truth about the Great Leap Forward and the huge famine and the appalling, unnecessary loss of life between 1958 and the early 60s. Man-made famines, basically. I think already that's coming out now.
Yeah, there was a recent publication, wasn't there? I think it was Tombstone, I think. I think a lot of memoirs are coming out.
Yes,
so.
a lot of material is coming out. And I think that there is pressure in China for this kind of thing to be owned up to and revealed and considered and discussed. So it's
a tough one.
And I think that there is this. I don't know China as well as Japan because I don't visit China. But I was just talking to a student of mine who's doing an MA at the moment. Who's just been in China for 2 years. And he was telling me that there's tremendous anti-Japanese sentiment in China, and he's teaching young children, one of whom was talking about how China was going to take its revenge on Japan.
It's over the islands at the moment.
It's over the islands, but it's really, he said, of course he's only working in one place, in one particular age group, but he's got 10-year-olds saying goodbye to him and saying, thank you for teaching me, but I won't forgive you for what your country did to China, during the early part of the 20th century. So they have a very powerful sense of grievance.
That's
China.
really
That's
hard.
powerful,
And that may be that's being channeled against China's enemies, so as it won't be channeled against China's government, if you see what I mean. So there may be a lot of resentment deliberately channeled against external enemies rather than enemies rather than allowing people to actually look at and think about the limitations of their own government and how short-changed they are by it.
Very touchy subject to even bring up.
But I think that's kind of a problem many modern countries and modern history has with countries in which there has been such a strong regime in dealing with the sources and the archives. Because I remember watching a German movie about the Holocaust and whatnot, and how the information started getting there very slowly, but it wasn't until like the very beginning of the 90s or something like that when they actually allowed people to access archives for a very limited period of time, and the actual sources, they were bits that were, this fragment is missing, this fragment's, things like that. Or in Spain, for example, nowadays you barely can access anything that has to do with Civil War or so. It's one of those things, and I mean, it's not
there
part
are
of
taboo subjects everywhere, aren't
and it always makes me think, like, is it really the duty of the historian trying to get those things out there? What's the approach? It is difficult. It is difficult.
I think really good historians just keep digging. They keep, for example, in the American case, they keep trying to get documents. They persist until they get them. And you've got to be really determined to get them, because even when there's relative freedom of information, like in the US, there are documents that are sensitive, and you just have to keep
trying.
Keep trying until you get hold of them, because they can be extraordinarily revealing.
Definitely worth it in the end, in the long run.
Especially if you can get like the equivalent of a scoop as a historian, so you get on the radio and television, become a celebrity for a few minutes. Not a celebrity, but someone on radio on TV.
Someone there. Yeah. Well, I think this ties in with the next question. Do you think history has a future, and what sort of future do you think we have out there for us?
As an academic subject,
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I think history has weathered various storms since the 80s and has been buffeted by all sorts of political forces and a kind of prevailing climate of opinion whereby history is not seen as useful because it's not vocational, and yet recruitment for history, for BA history, for university history, is still very, very good. The first year this year is about 160.
Yeah. It's ridiculous.
And when I
know.
started here, we were getting 60 or 70 students in our first year.
Wow, so
That's
a
a lot.
boost.
Yeah.
So history, I think, is regarded seriously as a challenging subject that prepares students well, not just for employment, but for their wider social and political responsibilities.
That increase is
Sounds
amazing,
important.
especially with the tuition fees going up as
Yes.
well.
Yeah.
Yes,
No,
That's brilliant.
I was really
it's
impressed.
astonishing.
Wow.
I've never seen numbers like this. I mean, our numbers have been good for several years, but this year, you know, when you look at creating consuming in the first year, if they all show up, there's about 165 students. So the stripe is pretty well full.
Wow.
Wow, that is amazing.
That is